not what I'm saying.
Yes, it is, Jess, it is. No, you have the kind of perfect, privileged life that 99% of women will never, ever have.
Okay. Yeah, my life's not perfect. No.
No, but you are, aren't you? And you make it very clear that the rest of us, will never compare.
Yeah, I feel like I got the opportunity to explore, some of the challenges that motherhood brings. I thought it was a pretty authentic and honest look at, the darkness that can be for some women, and what it means for relationships and friendships. And it's such a particular time, in people's lives. And then I love that the show is really entertaining too. I love the idea of it, the whodunit, and it's fast paced. I feel like it was a good mix of two genres.
Yeah, I've just been writing a feature about this actually, about how increasingly I think popular cultural TV is starting to look at experiences of women, of mothers specifically. I don't know why it's quite taken so long, because 51% of the population is a woman, and we've all had mothers or been mothers, or we've not all been mothers, but if we haven't been mothers, we've got sisters or friends who have been, and I think that particularly addressing the sort of what we're calling the darkest reaches of motherhood, and the sort of actual reality of how tough it can be after you've had a newborn, particularly in an environment where parenting can be quite competitive. Motherhood can be, mothers these days can exert lots of pressures on themselves, whether they're boss girls or trad wives or somewhere in between. I think it's good to be adding to the debate, I guess, and stirring the pot and being part of that. Yeah, it's long overdue, I think.
Some of the more extreme scenes just require you to really lean into them, in a way. Those are the fears that you have inside of you anyways as a parent, your worst case scenario fears, and it is, strangely therapeutic to just lean into it and let it out. What was very difficult for me and exhausting is just the nature of the beast of television, where you don't shoot episodically, and in a day you go from a very extreme emotional scene like losing your daughter to the next scene being a lovely picnic in the woods. So it's a lot on your mind. Like you hold a lot of tension because the character is always tense, right? I was definitely happy when that was over. My daughter was with me because we were filming over the summer, and that felt like the biggest stress relief, to be honest, coming home to like this beacon of light, who was the opposite of what I've just had on set, and just being able to hold her extra tight because of all these crazy emotions. That's what I was really craving. So I did feel a little bit like an outsider at times, which I think most likely was self-inflicted coming from this part, her being the only American. And but they were lovely and very supportive of me, and they kind of they totally got it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I was actually surprised, because I kind of think I'm quite a control freak, but I found it quite liberating that a book has a different life in a show. And actually, when I was writing the book, I was just before I finished the edits, there's a story, as Joe alluded to, of Liz's own story. It's in the 1980s, and it's her mother's parenting. And just before I filed the story, I kind of said to my editor, "Oh, do you know what? I just wonder if this is too dark. I don't think we should have this in it." And she said, "It's too late now. You've got to file the book." And it involves a dead baby. And actually, when you're making a show, that is actually a taboo, that we couldn't go there. And I think that's completely right. And what we did instead, not me, the script writers, I gave notes on it, was to flesh out the quartet. So in the book, it's very much Jess and Liz, but these other two women, Mel and Charlotte, become much bigger characters. And in particular, in the book, it's Charlotte who's the villain, the one who Frankie opens the door to, not Rob. And we altered that. And actually, right at the very first Zoom I had in August 2020 with the producers, it was a competitive environment, and they were one of, more than one team who wanted to buy the book. They said, we want to make Rob the guy who turns up and not Charlotte. And the thinking was that, which I kind of agree with, that it's particularly difficult to accept that another woman would behave, another mother would behave in the way that Rob does. There's a great line in episode 6 where Rob goes, I mean, I'm a bit of a dick, but I'm not a monster. And actually, we've all known guys a bit like Rob who are a bit of a dick, but not a monster. And that's the nature of accidents, that, they happen to, not monsters, but, all of us, as we say. So it made more sense to have Rob as that character, and he's a very slight character in the book, and to flesh that out. Partly as well, in the show, Charlotte becomes a much sexier character. So in the book, she's kind of a bit of a blue stocking. She's the really intellectual one. She feels a bit clunky. There's a line where she says Andrew calls her a handsome woman, whereas Jess is beautiful and dainty. And she's always held a candle for Ed. They had a sort of drunken snog when they were students, but nothing more. But by making her, and there's a hint, there's an indication that at the final PTA fair, she sort of propositions Ed or suggests that she'd like to be more involved. But there's none of these scenes in getting drunk in wine bars and flirting with him and, propositioning him while his wife's in a police cell, as Jess says. We felt that if we'd made Charlotte both a femme fatale and, the one who leaves this baby, that would just make her too monstrous. And I think the viewer would also be very critical with another woman for behaving like that. So that was why that was altered. So that's the main change. Getting rid of the 1980s backstory because we just didn't need it. I was trying to show that ideally we're more understanding about mental health in the present day than we were in the 80s, and that there's more support, but we didn't need that. And there's a little bit more of a mystery because Jess, the whole playpen idea of, how it couldn't have been Frankie because I put the baby in the playpen, that doesn't exist in the book. So we introduced a little bit more mystery. So lots of those were from the writer's room. And as far as I was concerned, as long as they were faithful to not sensationalizing the theme of perinatal OCD, I was okay with it. I think that obviously leans into the whole Big Little Lies idea, doesn't it? And it was a way of, we discover at the end that they're actually talking to the social worker, but I guess it was a way of conveying the judgment that they're all making about each other. It was quite an efficient way about that, and also about driving through the story, a reminder of, and giving insight as well into different characters and their relationships, the fact that they've known each other for a decade, so they could allude back to that. In fact, I think we ended up going through the book. The book, there's a lot that's sort of in the inner consciousness, and several of those lines were kind of pulled out from the book actually, and then just given to characters, at the end to sort of weave it all together. I mean, it was always a device from the start, but we then sort of added more and took some away and things like that. Yeah, I think I think it makes sense when you realise at the end that they're all talking to the social worker, and it also enables Jess to explain what perinatal OCD is in episode 6 to really confront it, because before that point Liz has been saying, how's the therapy going? But, Jess hasn't been able to sort of speak honestly about it until that point.
It was nice as well, I thought, as a tactic to sort of show another dimension to every character, because there was such an honesty and truth in it, in those social worker moments. There were things that possibly each character could not say in front of the other characters, no matter how close their friendship is. They could never, really be quite so. Well, Charlotte possibly could because it's in her nature, but some of the other characters wouldn't possibly have been quite so blunt or been so honest about their feelings about what was going on at the time. And I thought that was really nice to add a whole other dimension to these friendships and relationships that everyone's got their own kind of secret thoughts about situations that sometimes they wouldn't necessarily kind of air. So I thought it was really fun to play with. I think what makes certainly there's more of it in the novel actually, but I think what makes her decision easier in a sense is that Liz has had has been on the end and experienced neglect herself from her own mother in the past. And I think when she says in one of those to camera pieces that, you know, anyone can snap and you never really know what's going on with people at home. And I think her training makes her aware of that. But also, I think ultimately she knows that sometimes probably people thought her mum was had it all together, and at home she knew that she didn't. So I think she knows better than most that good people can do bad things. So, you know, I think that really compounds it for Liz, as well as the fact that she knows that we're all fallible. She knows she tries her hardest and she doesn't always get it right, does she? So I think that does compound her guilt.
Yeah, I mean, that's so scary, right? Because what's going on in her mind as we come to get to know her better, you can see how scared she is for her sanity, for the safety of her children, and she's slowly but surely not trusting herself around those objects. I was shocked when I read those scripts and just learning about the depth of fear and just, you know, this dark circle that just keeps getting darker by the minute. It's got to be so debilitating.
I think Liz feels like it was just an accident at that point. I do think that she doesn't want to believe and doesn't think for a very long time, for a huge part of it, that the worst has happened with either of the parents. You know, I think she's going by the protocol for her job because she knows that's the right thing to do, and because she knows from her own experience that these possibilities, as hard as they are to imagine, can happen. But I think along the way she believes in her good friends. They've been good friends of hers for years, you know, and so I think she's also just maybe a little bit conditioned from her upbringing to know that some people express themselves physically, and to kind of be a bit more accepting about that than most people should, I think, because that's been in her own life, you know. So when somebody lashes out like that, I think she means what she says when she says it's fine, I've had worse, you know. I understand he's upset. I don't think it makes her go, oh, hang on, maybe it was him. I think it might make the audience feel like that, and I think it should, and that's brilliant. But I think for Liz, I think she's really quite tough, and that was one of the things I really loved about playing Liz, that she's come from a slightly different place to a lot of the other characters in the show, and it's a little bit more, she's a bit more streetwise, and she's a little bit more kind of, you know, for good or bad, accepting and forgiving of people's kind of issues. Do you know, I'm not actually sure that there isn't a moment that she does. I think there's a slight moment where she considers that Jess might not have. I think she genuinely means it when she has that lovely explanation with her bosses where things have spiraled out of control. I genuinely think that she's done the right thing, and she thought in her head, I'm going to press this button and this trigger because it's the right thing to do and I have to do it. But very quickly they will go, oh, it's fine, it was just an accident, and it'll all be cleared up, and Jess will understand why I had to press that button, you know. And suddenly it doesn't get all cleared up so simply, and Jess isn't making the sense that she should make, and things are feeling strange and not right. And I think that's really concerning. But every step of the way, I think Liz is more confused than you know, sure that anything bad has happened for a very long time. And I think there's a waver in the middle. And I think that I think the moment that Jess takes the baby out of the hospital is a really difficult time for Liz, because I used to get frustrated that Liz doesn't realise sooner that Jess is unwell, actually, because we know that any mother who's in fear of their child being moved and in such a delicate situation, in their right mind, it would never be the mother taking the child out. It's a bit Caucasian chalk circle, isn't it, of all the people to disconnect the wires and take the baby and rock the boat. It shouldn't be the mother. And so that moment, if any, makes no sense to Liz and is very scary. And I think at that point, when Jess is then finally carted off, she is thinking, oh God, you know, what is going on? And it leads her into then researching and thinking, no, this isn't right, and finding out and realizing that her friend is not well. And that's just, then comes all that guilt that she's got with the fact that she's got a close friend that she's neglected. And this is another thing I loved about Liz and about the show, and, you know, about all the women in the show, that so often, I think a lot of us, and I've certainly experienced this, you're working so hard and you're trying so hard to be a good mother and to be a good friend and to do your job and to be a partner or a wife, and you end up splitting yourself every which way, and you end up being no good at any of them because you're just exhausted and you've split yourself in too many places. And I really see that in Liz, and I think she's kind of working all hours there. She's neglecting Nick, she's neglecting her own children, and luckily they've got Nick and they're all surviving. But you know, she then goes, well, I've also neglected all my friendships. So, you know, how could I, of all people, as a doctor, have missed how unwell my friend was? And it's just another moment where that compounds how useless she feels in every area of her life, I think. There's
a brilliant speech in episode 2, which isn't in the book, because the whole Provence thing isn't in the book either. And I just think it's like the battle I'm writing about at the moment. And Joe says, or Liz says, you know, I work 60-hour week. I never have time to spend enough time with my kids or do something for myself, and my house is a mess. But, you know, my family are reliant on me for my salary for the mortgage. And it's this real battle cry of, she's furious with Liz, with Jess, because Jess has this privileged life 99% of people will never have. But it's such a visceral kind of, 60 hours a week is quite extreme, but there will be so many working mothers who'll be like, yeah, that is my reality. I'm juggling both of them and I don't do any of them well enough, you know. And I think that is, you know, we were sold this belief we could have it all, and actually we can't have it all, really. You know, something has to give.
I don't know. You know, it's hard to say. Is it forgiveness, or is it the realization that this forced moment of healing, right? I mean, in the way, the moment she made that call, yes, destroyed her world, but also got Jess to admit that she needed help and that it has to happen now. I think it's just that realization of, I probably would have done the same if I was the doctor in this instance, and I do need help, and I can see where you were coming from, right? So, I mean, who knows where they would go from there, right? I mean, Betsy's a lot younger, but I think the perfection of wanting to put on the show, right, for everybody is not as urgent maybe anymore. And I think Jess is slowly but surely learning that the simple things can just be as nice, and, you know, not having to perform is a possibility. But I guess that was the intention of that being a little bit more intimate and smaller.